What's up? What's happening on a Tuesday? It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always alive as well on the free Odyssey app. Stacked one today and a guest list that is growing. Tell you more about it in just a few minutes. I will tell you quickly up front, Bobby Marks will join us from ESPN, their front office insider, at 4:30 to talk about the NBA draft lottery tonight and some potential Bradley Beal trades as the market continues to take shape in the NBA's offseason. However, we start with news that broke, 2:29 p.m., so a little over an hour and a half ago by the time this story dropped and our show starts. I know Russell was talking about it, but Josh Harris, the Philadelphia 76ers co-owner who announced an exclusive deal to purchase the Commanders last week, is expecting this team to make him money. Now that in itself is clearly not breaking news, and if that really is just logic. Like, duh, Craig, thanks for sharing. Appreciate your time. Could you perhaps be a bit more constructive with how you structure your radio show? That's not me BSing, though. That is new from a report from Seth Wickersham and John Keim at ESPN, thanks to a prospectus that has leaked. So there are a lot of details, a lot of specifics here. I will do my best to summarize, give you a TikTok, a blow-by-blow of what you need to know, if you will, from this story, and then obviously some opinion on it. First and foremost, I think it's interesting that this is from the Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment Group and its advisors, and this document was obtained by ESPN. That means at this point, when this version was going in March, that David Blitzer was a part of the group. That is something we learned when Harris put out his statement last week publicly. We did not know that David Blitzer, Harris's longtime business partner in the sports world, who he co-owns the 76ers with, who he co-owns the Devils with, was in this. Obviously, this has been in the works for a while. I think that is something that I would like to ask Seth or John or Josh Harris, whenever he ultimately speaks, of when Blitzer entered the equation, because originally the thought was that he wasn't going to. But this prospectus obtained by Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment says that ultimately Virginia thinks will offer the best package for a new stadium, potentially up to $1.5 billion. That is fascinating. I think that is a number that certainly they are not coming up with out of the blue. That is not wishful thinking. The point is they've done their research. They have, and throughout the course of this process, certainly talked to folks in Virginia, talked to folks in Maryland, talked to folks in D.C., and have a sense of what they would like and what is possible. I think it's interesting that they also do say, like, hey, Landovers or Maryland is still in this, RFK, D.C. is still in this prospectus, but ultimately they think that the best incentive package, the way they're going to get the most money, is going to be for building a stadium in Virginia. And that would double the American record, $750 million in public funds from the state of Nevada that went into the Raiders Stadium. By the way, the state of Nevada and Las Vegas just signed a massive deal to relocate Oakland's other team, the A's, to Las Vegas, pending MLB relocation approval. So quite a competition there for public money. I do not know how that's going to play in the state of Virginia. Like, there's an interesting political side discussion for a different show to have on having that title. Certainly, folks in Virginia, a lot of them would like the team, and depending on where you are and where it's going to go, like, having the team there makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. I don't know that Virginia taxpayers are going to be super keen on paying $1.5 billion worth of taxes to get that stadium there. Then again, $1.5 billion divided over X amount of years by X amount of millions of people that live in the state of Virginia, or if it's, a sales tax, it's on certain goods. Like, who knows how that's going to be funded, but they think that that is the best package that they are going to get. The headline, though, of this story, well, I think that might be the most important thing. The headline of this story is that Harris sees Commanders' windfall without Dan Snyder. Fairly bluntly throughout this memo, they lay out something that is kind of, an undeniable truth, that this fan base has shrunk, downsized, and the only thing it's gained is apathy towards this organization, thanks in large part to Dan Snyder. And that the second Dan Snyder is gone, there is going to be major opportunities they do put numbers on this, which I think is interesting. But the general thought is there are, whether it's season ticket holders, whether it is suite holders, so not just like fans buying regular seats, but like kind of the big money executive type folks who buy suites not for themselves, but for their companies. Those folks, media rights that people have not wanted to deal with this team because Snyder is the owner, all kinds of sponsorships that it is going to rapidly and very largely increase as soon as Dan is gone. Last season, reading from the ESPN story, the Commanders made $173 million in local revenue, dollars generated from tickets, sponsorships, parking, and other team activities, according to the prospectus. In his base estimate, Harris projects the number will more than double to $380 million by the 2031-32 season and could hit $466 million that year if the team builds a new stadium. A quote from the prospectus says, the Commanders historically ranked top in the league across all local revenue metrics and attendance. However, the team has significantly spiraled as a result of allegations against current ownership. As ownership changes, we see opportunities to substantially drive local revenue and bring the team back to the top of to a top NFL market. I think that that's super interesting. There's two other mega interesting things I'm going to talk about next. There's two other numbers here that I want to hit on real quick. And I've talked about this quite a bit. I didn't know the numbers. I wouldn't say like I was fudging them, but I was kind of throwing out. There's a wide range of what certain things that are involved in this deal could be worth. And now we have, according to the prospectus, the number. The land at FedEx Field is worth $284 million. And I have said the land in Ashburn is wildly, wildly valuable. Now, I hadn't heard anything, but I was like, it wouldn't surprise me if it was worth $1 billion. Now, that turns out to be too rich, but it is worth $441 million, according to this prospectus. So, as the team continues to build, whether it's a new stadium and practice facility, however it is, if they ultimately want to sell that land in Ashburn, a quick way to make almost $500 million, and who knows, you get a bidding war between some tech companies, the value all of a sudden becomes that's a starting point. What are you actually willing to pay for it? Do a couple of, a Google and an Amazon or whoever else, because there's all this fiber wire and all this stuff out in Ashburn. Do they get in a bidding war and all of a sudden you're making $500-600 million in a couple of years, also depending on the real estate market? It's possible. So that's why this sale is so expensive. That's why it is $6.05 billion. It is worth noting in this story that ownership sources tell ESPN that if the owners were not so quick and so eager to get rid of Dan Snyder, there is no way the funding that this group is put together would actually pass. They are, I wouldn't say concerned, but there's a lot of, quote, it's taking some creative financing, which I think goes to the Albert Breer story yesterday. This is the last sale that is ever going to be done like this unless Bezos quickly buys the Seahawks, because he is one of the few people that can actually afford to buy an NFL team at current valuations. But this is going to get done. There's no reason that it wouldn't. And this is pretty fascinating insight into not just what Josh Harris and company want to do with the Commanders and how he went about recruiting a lot of other investors. Like, this is the kind of prospectus that, whatever version it was at the time, obviously by March, Magic Johnson was long involved, but was presented to someone like Magic Johnson to get him involved. It also shows where the team was, because obviously some of the finances that Harris and company were able to look at in the course of the buying process are in this document. There's two more other key points I want to get to next. One of them is around the stadium. We'll start there. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. ESPN's Bobby Marks on the NBA Draft Lottery, what is certainly the biggest day the NBA has had for teams that aren't good in a long, long time, considering the depth of this upcoming NBA draft. We'll talk about it with Bobby and some potential options for the Wizards with Bradley Beal coming up at 4:30. However, we continue to talk about this massive story that ESPN just published, a prospectus that they got their hands on from the Josh Harris Group, which they use then to pitch investors on joining them as they take over the Washington Commanders. There are two stadium-adjacent things in here that are super important, super fascinating. One is cause for celebration. The other one is a pretty gigantic bummer. Let's start with the good one. Let's start with the good news. The good news is FedEx Field is not going to be FedEx Field that much longer, which, all due respect to FedEx and Fred Smith and everybody there, I don't care. Like, FedEx Field's a fine name. I think it kind of conjures up a lot of bad memories and bad feelings because it's been the home to a lot of bad football. And, you know, if on the cleanse, we've all talked about the name change with, you know, are they going to dump Commanders in here? Okay, we don't know if they're going to dump Commanders. Actually, there's been some reporting. I don't even know if you want to call it reporting, but there's been some Twitter folks that say that it's off the table. And actually, I think even Ian Rappaport came on the record yesterday and said it's not something they're considering. So for the considerable future,
we are the Commanders.
That's right. We are the Commanders. However, we will not be playing at FedEx Field because in the licensing agreement for FedEx, which pays the Commanders about $7 million a year in order to have the naming rights to the stadium in Landover, there is a clause that says if ownership changes, that the name can change. Well, $7 million in 1990, whatever it was, 1998, 1999, was a pretty significant naming rights fee. However, $7 million in 2023, not very good, especially not in this area where there's so much big business and so many people that, especially if this team can turn it around and become good, will want to associate with this team and be the home of this team. So, from the ESPN story quoting the prospectus, according to the document, FedEx has a stadium naming rights deal worth $7.6 million annually for the Commanders and can cancel the current deal upon a change of control. A new naming rights deal could be worth at least $30 million annually for the team. Harris's perspective estimates, though, it could be significantly higher given the D.C. market and strong corporate presence. Now, it does say here, the way that reads, FedEx has a stadium naming rights deal with worth $7.6 million annually for the Commanders and can cancel the current deal upon a change of control. I do wonder if FedEx has the rights to that, or if that change of control is both ways. It's something we can ask John Keim or Seth Wickersham if they join us, which I'm pretty sure that within the next, whether it's today or tomorrow, we will have Seth. John and I have been texting as well, so there's a chance that Keim joins. Both of them are obviously extremely busy working on this story and the follow-up to it. So either way, it sounds like Harris Group thinks they can get another, again, $30 million plus annually at least. Let's say that number's 35. Let's say that number's 37.6. That makes it easier to talk about because that's exactly $30 million more a year of revenue. That is a massive amount. That does, you know, a significant chunk of the upgrades to the practice facility or to FedEx Field that this group wants to do pretty immediately. And that's why I think the NFL is also so willing to go along with this. Let's use the word that's used in here by the ownership source to Wickersham and Keim, creative funding, right? Sure, they might have to take on more debt than they initially would like coming into this, but this team is going to immediately start making more money. So the revenue that it generates is going to be a positive. Thus, there's going to be more money available that they can pay off the debt with And that is obviously the best way forward. Hey, we need to take on a little bit more on the front end because that's going to allow us to make the money. And the longer that the last guy's in charge, you're just not making that money. So you can either get mad at us and not have, like, we're not going to get in financial trouble. We're fine. It's just not according to your rules. And you can keep going with the guy you got and not make money. Or you can cut us a little bit of slack and then ultimately we'll make the money that's missing, because there's an opportunity cost right now that is far more than the risk of any kind of debt situation that Josh Harris would get himself in with this group before it starts to generate the revenue that can pay that off. So that $30 million a year, and that's, again, just in renaming the stadium. Now, as for the one that's not quite as fun, the actual stadium itself, that building, we've been looking at 2027, 2028. That, that was always the year, right? Because the team's contract with PG County expires in 2027. Now, Governor Wes Moore of Maryland, who I also think is going to be on the show soon, has already said, we're talking to the Commanders. We want to keep the Commanders in Maryland. This has been their home. We want to make it their home. We want to keep it being their home for a long, long time. We're willing to play ball now that Snyder is gone. However, there's just the logistics of building a new stadium. You have to select a site. You have to clear the site. You have to build the foundation. You have to build the stadium. That all takes a very long time. And by the way, picking the site and then getting approved and all the permitting and all that kind of stuff, because of the complexity here, can take years on its own. By the time that it works its way through state legislatures, or if it's D.C., we're through Congress. Like, there is a lot of potential roadblocks, which you hope are just road bumps, right? They're just speed bumps in the neighborhood, not a detour sign or a complete, like, we gotta turn around and go back and start again and take a different route to a stadium, and maybe we'll just go a different place for dinner. Like that, you just hope there are little bumps along the way. But that's before you get to the construction. And anyone who's ever done anything with construction knows construction never happens on time. So realistically, the prospectus estimates the team will have a new stadium. This is going to hurt, I'm sorry, by 2031. With, quote, potential to move into a new stadium earlier. Continuing from ESPN's reporting, although those in league circles and many fans have hoped for a new venue at the site of RFK Memorial Stadium just east of the Capitol in Washington, the Harris document predicts Virginia will offer the best incentives for a new building, up to $1.5 billion. That figure is multiple times more than what has been discussed amongst Virginia politicians in 2022, which, by the way, makes me think that, especially depending on how the governor's election goes in a couple years, that's 2025. I assume they probably have a spot picked out by then. But certainly as the state legislature flips back and forth, it's fairly tight in Virginia. And especially, by the way, the local stuff in Northern Virginia, which is going to be far less friendly to giving a bunch of really rich billionaires a bunch of public money. That is going to be real tough to get. But we'll see. It's their perspectives. It's not coming from nothing, but it is certainly, I think, wishful thinking. A source, though, tells ESPN, with reading from their story, with intimate knowledge of the complications and dynamics in getting a stadium built, believes that 2031 is too optimistic, given that the team has no site, no deal, and no financing, and that Harris's group is believed to not have the ability to write a check for a new stadium, as Stan Kroenke did for most of SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California. For some owners, a finished stadium can take upward of a decade to complete. The prospectus notes that the Commanders purchased an option to acquire 200 acres of land in Virginia for $100 million. So those are the two stadium notes. One, FedEx Field, hopefully not because I'm anti the name or the company or anything, just because more money for the franchise is good. Hopefully it won't be FedEx Field for that much longer. However, playing games in Landover seems to be something that is going to happen for quite the time being. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, switch gears, talk NBA draft lottery and NBA offseason with Bobby Marks of ESPN.
This
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Switching gears from the football now and the new ESPN report to what's going to be on ESPN tonight, which is the NBA's draft lottery. Also, if you're a super draft nerd like me, you might catch the NBA Combine starting here soon on ESPN2. ESPN's Bobby Marks is going to be a part of the coverage of both, and he joins us now. Bobby, great to talk. I think I had you like way back in the day when I was working in Dallas. You might have still been at Yahoo, but all these years later, welcome back to the show.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So I want to go through some potential Wizard stuff with you on the back end here. Certainly something that's top of your mind right now in the middle of May, but can you remember a draft lottery quite like tonight where there is such a prize at the top, but also depth throughout this draft? Like, do we have to go back to LeBron in 2003, or is there one more recently that you can remember as hyped and probably as worthy of the hype?
No, I mean, '03 is the strongest. I mean, certainly '96 is really strong. That was, Iverson, Kobe, Ray Allen, Steve Nash. That group there was ridiculously strong. I think it's a little bit different now because of where we are, social media, the world we live in, the hype. Certainly with Victor, well deserved here. I think, yeah. I mean, it's why we call it a lottery. I mean, there's a difference between a guy hitting $10 million on a lottery ticket than winning $500 here, and whoever gets the number one pick, it's a franchise difference maker. It's a difference maker to what the player brings to on the court. It's a difference maker to the valuation of your franchise in itself. It's a difference maker to the people who sell tickets. If it's the Wizards, I mean, I would be stunned if you're not selling out every game. I mean, that's the reality of it here. So there is a huge amount at stake. But as you said, there's a lot of other good players in this draft. I mean, it's deep with wings. If you stay where you are, you should be able to still get a good pick. Or even if you get up to the top three and you're at 2 or you're at 3, it's strong. Within.
I was going to ask you that, Bobby. How deep are we talking here? Wembanyama's generational. Got it. Check. I'm sure that, especially if the Wizards win, then we'll have someone on to talk about him every day. I'll be doing interviews in French before I know it. But Scoot Henderson's kind of known to be the second guy. But what's the next tier behind Wembanyama? How big is that tier of players?
Yeah, I mean, I think you go Brandon Miller from Alabama. I think he's probably a little bit ahead where Scoot is, I think some of it's going to be maybe preference. Certainly if you're looking for a guard, if it's the Wizards at 2, let's say, does he fit better than, let's say, Brandon Miller, the Thompson twins who were at overtime elite, and then the Thor Thompson. There is a ton of wings, as I said here, whether it be guys like Grady Dick and Cam Whitmore from Villanova. The list goes on and on and on here. So. I think there is probably, from where Victor is, there's, certainly probably that next group of players. And then, if you're picking at 10 or 11 here, as I said, you're still going to get a really good, good player.
Bobby Marks, ESPN front office insider with us here on the Team 980. You mentioned that there's guys from overtime elite in this draft, and the NCAA tournament was so bizarre this year because there just weren't a lot of top prospects headlining it all. And, Miller was the top one probably, but there's obviously a lot of extra stuff off the court that's kind of floating around him, and Alabama got bounced relatively early. How has the G League and guys not going to school the way they used to, not even just the way they used to 5 years ago where guys still went, even though it was one and done for a year, but the G League advent of it changed how teams scout. Do you think they have a better sense now, or is it harder to scout now?
I think you have a better sense, especially for the G League Ignite players here, because they're playing against NBA level competition, right? You're playing against guys who have been, guys who are on 2-way contracts, first or second rounds, who've been sent down and are playing. If you're looking at Scoot's a little bit different. Scoot's been in and out of the lineup this year. He's had a concussion. He's got some other things, so he didn't play a full amount of games. But I'll give you an example. Leonard Miller, who was here last year at the Combine, was basically a deer in the headlights. Right? He goes and plays a year at the G League Ignite. has a really good year, gets bigger. He's about 220 now, a little more mature, and has probably has solidified himself being in the top 20. And it's easier. It's certainly easier for you to scout, because you're playing 40, 50 games against affiliates of your parent club.
Bobby Marks again with us tomorrow and Thursday, the Draft Combine on ESPN2. Draft Lottery tonight on ESPN, where obviously the Wizards and other franchises will have their fortunes turn for better or for worse, depending on those ping pong balls. The other interesting thing, I think, Bobby, that fascinates me about the league now in regards to the draft and the scouting process is, you can make an argument that 3 to 4, maybe even the best 5 players in the league at this point are all international guys. And obviously, a guy like Luka, pretty known commodity, still doesn't go 1 overall, but top 5 pick. A lot of these other guys, whether it's teens, 20s, a guy like Jokic develops. Giannis, obviously, incredible story and hard to scout because of where he was playing before he got to the league. But how has the international scouting evolved over the past couple of years to try and account for that, as the NBA has made so much investment abroad and the game has generally globalized?
Yeah, what's happening too is a lot of these players, and you're even seeing it a little bit more here over in the States. They're going to, whether it be Barcelona or some of these other these other programs, 13, 14 years old. Right, they're going as 8th graders here, and it's basically kind of that academy approach. You're starting to see it a little bit here with IMG and Mount Verde, some of those other, example, Tariq Whitehead from Duke, was at Mount Verde for all 4 years, and so you're starting to see that a little bit. So from an advanced standpoint, European players, guys overseas, are probably a little more skilled, just because there's been so much of a focus on it here, and that gives them certainly an advantage.
We spent the last couple months on this show doing so much NFL draft talk, and a lot of that winds up being around the psychological, parts of players as well. Mm-hmm. On the NBA side, as someone who used to work in a front office, what goes into the scouting of the makeup of a player and how that affects versus the skill, especially as we see a lot of questions for very different reasons about a Ja Morant now, who's got his whole situation again. Sure. Zion and how his approach has been in the league. How does that factor in, and what has the NBA done to try to help teams evaluate that part of it?
Well, it's hard because, Ja coming out of Murray State was clean. There was no background. His background report was strong, so now we're in year 4, and now certainly things have popped up here. I think the only thing you can really do is you sit down with the player. You'll certainly evaluate him on the court, and then you sit down with him and you talk with him and you interview him, and you do a psych workup or a personality test here, and you get a comfort level, right? Can you trust that player? If we're going to invest $40 million in you, can we trust you? Why should we draft you? How do you fit in? And you some of it's really gut. As much as a coach can tell you anything, college coach can tell you anything about him. It's basically, can he fit in within your locker room? Is he coachable? There's a lot of different kind of variables in here, and that doesn't mean 3 years from now or 4 years from now that things can go sideways. But it's at least kind of gives you a little bit of a platform, at least for right now.
Bobby Marks, ESPN front office insider with us here on the Team 980. The last thing kind of on this route, Bobby, and then we'll get into some of the Wizards' potential trades and their front office options, all that. But you're at the Combine, again, tomorrow and Thursday, the coverage on ESPN2. What value does the Combine have at this stage in the NBA? It's such a big deal in the NFL. Yep. And by the way, for many of the same reasons you just said, the injury screenings and then obviously the chance to sit down with prospects. But since so many of the top prospects skipped the NBA Combine, what value does it still have in 2023? And is there anything the league can do to make it better for teams?
Well, next year they're going to mandate it. It's going to be mandated for all players to attend. That doesn't mean every player is going to be playing 5-on-5. This year, we've seen, certainly it gets watered down a little bit because some guys are only doing testing, some do interviews. Starting next year, it's part of the collective bargaining agreement. You got to be here no matter what, or you're declared draft ineligible. Those are the rules. Certainly there's situations like Victor would have been allowed because he's still playing in overseas right now. But yeah, that doesn't mean we're going to see the top prospects playing 5-on-5. I think the big picture of is if you're relying on just the combine to do your scouting evaluation, you're about 4 steps behind here. It helps, certainly. Andrew Nemhard played really well last year, but he had a good career at Gonzaga. Jalen Williams from Santa Clara helped himself last year and got into the lottery, but he had a good career at Santa Clara here. So it helps. I mean, it's hard because the makeup of your team over the next couple of days, you better have a good point guard. You don't have a good point guard, you're going to be, the box score is going to be nondescript here. So I think a lot of it, I think the interviews are as important. Players will meet with teams over the next few days besides their team visits here. I think the team visits are extremely important because you get on the court, and it's less about, playing 3-on-3 and 1-on-0 and stuff, but it's just you're on the court with the coach. Can you, get a comfort level as far as, teaching him there? So it's just part of everything. But, I'd rather see a guy play, Duke, Carolina and get an evaluation from that compared to playing, a Wednesday afternoon, combine game.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, my favorite question to ask NBA guests these days. To your best knowledge, / if you were in an NBA front office, what is Bradley Beal's value right now? Is he a negative value contract? Is he an asset that people are going to want? What do the Wizards have in current Bradley Beal if all of a sudden Ted Leonsis is like, yes, we can trade him, and Brad, there's a destination that he wants to go to, so the no trade clause in this particular, or for the purposes of this question, is not an issue?
Well, I would just say this. If you're thinking about trading Bradley Beal, you better do it this year. You better do it within the next year here, because with the new CBA rules coming, and most of them will start this offseason, but the teeth of these rules will start next offseason in 24 about the ability of how much money you can take back in a trade. And if you're one of these tax apron teams, aggregating money, so basically, sending out 50, you won't be able to send out a 30 and a $20 million player. It's a lot easier to trade, a $45, $50 million player this offseason and during the regular season. So if there's even a thought of that, I would look heavily into that. If it's next year, you're asking me, it's a net asset. I mean, that's the reality of it here. It's hard to build rosters nowadays when you have 3 players making $40 million. It's not possible. I mean, that's the reality. You better have a good supporting cast system. So that's why the concern for me is, what's the cost of Porzingis? What's the cost of Kuzma here? You have to have good. You have to draft well. You have to be reliant on that next wave of players. That's where Golden State kind of might get themselves in a little trouble with Poole and Kuminga and Moody. You're thinking those 3 guys are your next starters down the road here. So he's got certainly value based on what he can do on the court. But when you have that big of a number, and you're not going to trade for him if you've got 2 other guys making $40 million. It's just unrealistic.
So one of the destinations that I've been told is possible is Philadelphia, and that obviously was a discussion that they had years ago when a Simmons-Beal trade was on some level on the table. Depending on who you ask, will determine on how far down the road that was. But Joel and Brad are really, really good friends. They're both Drew Hanlon guys in terms of their trainer. It seems from a basketball fit that actually is a place that I think would really enhance Brad's game, playing off of Joel. But like you said, those are 2 very expensive contracts. But if Philly could unload Tobias Harris, and I'd have to check the math, whether it be like a Cork Muss. At this point, I don't think you're getting Tyrese Maxey back. He's too good. But is that a situation with what's going on in Philadelphia and the potential for Harden to leave? Is that a situation that you could see happening from both a financial and a basketball situation?
Well, I think it's from the Wizards' perspective. If you're comfortable just doing a salary dump, that's you're not getting draft picks back because the Sixers don't have any to trade you. So that's hey, if you want to just I'm sure Daryl Morey would take Bradley Beal, Tobias Harris, and whatever salary filler, and you don't have to include a Maxey. I mean, I would probably do that there. I mean, it's going to be hard building the roster around, to continue to build that. But if you're the Wizards and you just want to get rid of the salary, then that's a dump. It's a pure salary dump.
Well, I asked. I'm sure Howard Beck and have for a long time. I asked Howard this yesterday whether he would if he was Philadelphia, would you do Harris and Maxey for Beal? He said no. Would you do that? Would you be willing to include Maxey?
I probably wouldn't, because you're basically going to have him on half the cost of what Bradley Beal is going to be, and he's proven, as a starter to be at a high level.
I would agree with that. All right, last thing for you, Bobby. If you are the Sixers, I'm going to stick with one more Sixers question.
Sure.
Is there a particular, it's kind of crazy how the coaching carousel has turned.
Yeah.
Is there one particular coach that you would target? Or actually, I'll widen it out a little bit. Is there now with all these great coaches available and all these great jobs available, is there one fit that you really, really like and would like to see?
I'm intrigued, certainly, with Monty Williams. Certainly he was there at one time as an assistant. With that group, with Harden, if James resigns and Embiid, and he said Maxey, I'm intrigued with that. Nick Nurse, I'm intrigued with too. Just from a tactician, standpoint as far as in-game adjustments here. It's funny, like the three teams that have won the most games in the last year, 3 years, are looking for a head coach, and all three of those guys will probably be maybe coaching somewhere else. So is it the coach? Is it just we've hit a dead end here? That's kind of, it's almost you're better off being, winning 35, 36 games every year to have some type of job security.
Expectations, standards, when they raise, it can certainly get dangerous. Bobby, appreciate the time. As always, you can catch Bobby Marks tomorrow on ESPN's Draft Combine coverage. That's, again, tomorrow and Thursday on ESPN2. And then the Draft Lottery is tonight on ESPN. Bobby, thanks so much for the time. Hope to catch you down the road.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bobby Marks, everybody, with us here on the Hoffman Show. Anthony, let's react to what Bobby just said about Beal and the potential for a trade, because we were talking about this before the show. If someone is willing to take Beal's salary, and especially if it is Philadelphia in return for Tobias Harris and literally anything else, I am so down for that. He is such an albatross, and it's because of the contract, right? And this is not personal against Brad. Brad's an excellent basketball player. We've covered this a million times. But you cannot move forward as an organization to either restart, and this goes whether lottery luck is on your side tonight or not. You've got to move forward from Beal if you want a chance to reset. And there's actually a really great piece in The Athletic from it was David Aldridge and Josh Robbins, who asked, I think it was 5 or 6 other NBA executives, what they would be asking Ted Leonsis if they were interviewing for the job. And every single one of them was like, can we start over? And does that mean we can move Beal? And so the mission one can't be get as much as you can in return. Mission one has to be, we got to go. It's amicable. Hey, we obviously are going to send you somewhere you want to go because you have no trade clause, but we just would like to start over. And so if you're telling me you can trade Beal for Tobias Harris, and I'm about to plug in the numbers to see what else has to make the salary work, I am so down for that.
Greg, you speaking my language, man. You are speaking my language. I just think the no trade clause is really just puts everybody in like a weird, sort of situation, because Bradley Beal has all of the power and all of the leverage. And would you got to find a dancing partner, but it's easier said than done. And I think that's just, the hard part about this whole situation, just finding the person that's really going to want to, take on such a terrible contract.
It's got to be someone who wants Beal, the basketball player, right? And the two places that I heard early in the offseason that were potential, it was more of like, hey, Brad would go here, right? Because that's a huge part of this, is Miami and Philly.
Yep.
Right? Would he go to LA? Yeah, but they can't, like Bobby just said, they can't really do anything in LA. Like, they can't add Brad's contract to either Kawhi and PG and the Clippers or LeBron and AD and the Lakers. It's too expensive. Now, if Harden leaves, that is obviously a bad situation for Philly. But from a basketball standpoint, if they can run Maxey, Beal, and Embiid out there, now we're talking. I think if you're Philly, the ideal situation is you actually can work a sign and trade with Harden. Hey, man, all right, you want to go to Houston? Fine. We're going to trade you essentially to Washington, and then Washington will trade you to Houston. Houston sent, even if it's like, hey, we'll do a couple second-round picks, whatever, because Houston has the cap space to absorb Harden's salary. They could just sign him outright. But there also is potential reasons why Harden, well, actually, no, they got rid of those in the last CBA. You can't sign for more money and then take that contract with them. Signing trades are not eligible for the extended years or extended raises that they used to be available for. So Harden would just basically have to do Philly a solid. Mm-hmm. But there could be some benefits for Houston to save a little bit. Potentially, they give up a second-round pick or two, send those back to D.C., Tobias Harris and Furkan Korkmaz or DeAnthony Melton or something like that comes back to D.C., and then Beal goes to Philadelphia. That should theoretically work. The trade machines are all goofed up right now because they're working on this year's salaries as opposed to next year's salaries. But that would be the idea.
I think a move down to Miami, to me, will make the most sense for Bradley Beal just because of the way their team is set up. Jimmy Butler, we're seeing him basically put the team on his back. He needs help. Yes, Kyle Lowry is playing well this playoffs, but throughout the season, he wasn't, the player that he is now. Bam Adebayo is sort of inconsistent. Tyler Hero sort of kind of hit or miss here and there. I just think a situation in Miami where Jimmy needs some type of help would be best for both parties, to be honest. And I think they could financially make it right. They don't have too many crazy contracts.
So the Miami deal that would work, this is way better for Washington in terms of player return, would be Lowry and Tyler Hero. But if you're Miami, why would you give up Tyler Hero? Like, is Tyler Hero a better basketball player than Bradley Beal? I think they're way closer than people realize at this point. I mean, and also you're in the Eastern Conference Finals right now. Do you really want to give up on Kyle Lowry? Like, I know it's a ticking clock because he's older, but these are the kinds of things that teams are considering right now and why this dynamic has changed so much. Because all of a sudden, with Philly losing, like, they're probably going to retool. With Miami winning, maybe they don't. But those are the two that I would keep my eye on. The other dream scenario is if you could somehow get Chris Paul, which I say is a dream scenario because his contract is very cuttable. It's a pure salary dump, man. You take on Chris Paul. He's got a partially guaranteed deal this year. By the way, if he's willing to be a mentor for some young guys, teach them the right way to play, like, great. He's non-guaranteed the year after. You just move on. Or you flip him, say, hey, man, come be a good soldier. We'll trade you at the deadline to a contender. And you do that.
I would comment, but I'm not the biggest Chris Paul fan, so.
I'm not either. But, like, my goal is to dump. Okay,
that's fair.
When Bobby goes, if you're okay with a salary dump, hell yeah, I'm good with the salary dump.
Especially for this year anyway.
Yeah, right. And that's the thing. The people that don't know, like, the numbers have to match this year.
Yeah.
They don't have to match over the course of the contract. The problem is Brad hamstrings you for 4 more years.
Yes, sir.
4. 1, 2, 3, 4 more years. So if you get Tobias Harris, who's a big old contract that is done after this year, you then have this crazy thing called cap space going into 2024.
Yes, sir.
Of course, there is the Kuzma question. There is the Porzingis question. That still remain unanswered, and those will remain unanswered. Oh, that's what I meant to ask Bobby. Who should Ted Leonsis hire? But I think we all know the names that are in play. All righty. When we get back, we're going to talk about the Commanders with someone. That's the tease. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app.
You can take...
The Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. That wasn't not right what I did to you that one time, Ant, with the whole amphibious thing. That's a different story for a different day. Now it's time, instead of to make the show dumber like we frequently do with shenanigans like that, to make the show much, much smarter.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
To be honest, when we came up with the idea for this segment, it was for days like this. Our guy, John Keim, Cakes, my good buddy, joins us to talk about the story he co-wrote with Seth Wickersham on ESPN.com, a leaked prospectus from the Harris Group that shows the potential for a financial windfall when they take over simply by removing Dan Snyder. John, I think this is your first time live on the show. Welcome.
Oh, well, good. Where are the trumpets celebrating that?
Anthony, where are the trumpets? Did you forget the trumpets? Anthony left his trumpet at home. What a shame.
Okay.
What a shame. So I know you can't give up sources and methods, if you will, but when all of a sudden you find yourself staring at this document, like what's going through your head once you see, one, like, oh my God, I have this. And obviously you're working on that with Seth, but also like seeing some of the numbers. What are some of the things that stood out to you?
Well, yeah, and for me, it's looking at the numbers. And first of all, like the Harris Group prepares, my understanding is that they typically prepare a prospectus when you're looking for limited partners to invest because they come from the private equity firm world, and it's what they would do when they take over corporations or whatever, and it's what they've done in the past. Part of what makes this interesting is that you may be looking at more people needing to do this to buy into the NFL because the price of where it's going. So we'll start there. But as far as like the numbers that jump out, is as much the tumble in terms of attendance and revenue, the local revenue, how much it had fallen, and then obviously their projections are going to be their projections, but they're pretty rosy, and I don't know that a lot of people would disagree with where they could go and the impact when they eventually open a new stadium as well. So, I think, like I said, so the big numbers to me, the tumble, like it's been like, I would say in the last 10 years, it's like a 50% drop in the local revenue. And I think they projected to go up by about 50% over the next 7 years or so.
Yeah, that was one thing that stuck out to me, John, is the stadium information. The first was that they,
right.
There's a chance to rename FedEx Field. And I just wanted
that's the other one.
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of a point of clarification on the way the story was worded. It says with a change of ownership that there's a right to change. Is that something that FedEx
Correct.
would have to do, or is that something that the Harris Group can say, hey, we're in charge now?
Yeah, my understanding is that FedEx could get out of it if there's a change in ownership, and they believe they've been trying to get out of that. So I think that's where it would be. But yes, they can then change it. And then right now FedEx is it's 7.45 or
I think 7.6.
7.6. Thank you. All right, I have a lot of numbers in my head right now. So
I luckily enough have them on a computer screen in front of me.
So right, and so the projection could be as much as 30 per year, they believe. And so that's obviously a sizable difference. And that's why when you're looking at a return on investment, those are some of the things you're going to try and do right away. And then you brought up the stadium. I think that was the other thing that jumped out to me was their projection for revenue from a stadium doesn't begin until 2031. Now, that's noteworthy. Now, I will say this. That's a conservative timetable by them. And, they did even note on there that it could be earlier. So to me, that's like probably the latest they would look at it opening. But that's noteworthy because here they've been looking at 2027, 2028, thinking that once you get your place, you can break ground and it's 5 years. They're looking at it longer than that. And part of it is because I think they want to absolutely do their due diligence on it and not rush into a situation. So, it could be another year or so before they really find the place they want. I don't know, but it could be. And then it's like, then how long does it take once you break ground and what are you doing with it, how, et cetera. And I know Seth had talked to some people who believe it may even take longer than that based on some other stadiums that have been built over the last several years.
Right. John Keim, ESPN.com with us. And so that is the kind of the interesting thing, right? In the prospectus, it says this is kind of a conservative estimate. It could happen sooner. And then Seth talks to some folks, as you just said, that say not the way stadiums are going now. This could take even longer. And I think part of that is going to obviously depend on how much work has been done already, how much behind the scenes has, whether it's Harris, Rails, Magic. Magic obviously talked to Wes Moore at some point recently. There's these numbers from the state of Virginia, so you'd have to think there's been some conversations with the Commonwealth on potential there. What sense do you have on how much work has already been done so they can hit the ground running fairly immediately on that? Not just in terms of where the location is, but what they want to build, because they have to decide, is it just a stadium? Is it stadium and practice facility, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, and I think if I had to guess right now, the practice facility would probably be separate from where the building is, depending on I could see a scenario where they have a stadium, whether it's in FedEx, where it is now, or even in the district, but the practice facility remains in Virginia. That is a definite scenario. But I think, until they're on board, we don't really know what their vision is. I know this is in talking to some people who are, who've been involved in this process. But as far as the stadium goes, like what it would entail, it's hard to really know. I know, listen, you're not entering into a situation like this without having some level of input being made or information being sought, right? And there are clearly people here who have been working on the stadium, Joe Maloney and Jason Wright, for a while. And so their information will help without a doubt. But, you're still going to have to go through and meet and feel comfortable with what meaning Josh Harris and whomever else is involved there. So while there would be information already known, and I think perhaps like the locales, Virginia, Maryland, D.C., could start getting their situations more clear as to what they would offer or what incentives or inducements, whatever. And, I think that stuff is already being done. So that will help. But these guys still have to go through the process. And it is a top priority for them. And I think that's why it's funny, because I was talking to somebody earlier on Harris' side and bringing up the 2031 estimate. It's like, to me, when there have been people still here thinking maybe 2028, it does suggest that they want to take a patient approach to get it right.
So you have been going to work in various Commanders, Washington football, et cetera, locales for the past 25 years. And I think one of the interesting things in the story that I will tie back to you going to work there, every day during the season for the last 25 years in a moment, is when Harris took over the Sixers. In your story, it says that they did about $88 million worth of upgrades on all kinds of different things, a lot of that at the practice facility. As you've watched that building in Ashburn evolve over that time that you've been going there and seen it through different coaches, GMs, now you'll be on your third owner here. Like, what are some of the things that you think they can do and should do immediately versus things that they might wait on to ultimately get a new facility for the players to call home every day?
Well, here's what I would say, Craig. I think if they come in and say, like, the practice facility will be separate, you can work on that right away. So I would invest the time and energy into doing that, because it's going to be a lot easier to find a location and then the area to build with that. So you could do that a lot sooner than you could a new stadium. It doesn't necessarily have to be tied into the stadium and the facility going to open in 2031. If you know where it's going to be built, or if you know that, listen, regardless of where the stadium is going to be built, this is where the practice facility will be built, I would invest the money there. Now, there's clearly some things that you could do in the facility that they have done over the years. With the field was a big one a few years ago. They have upgraded some of the kitchen, the cafeteria and all that. But I think there's always more you could probably do in terms of maybe. I know there's a desire to update some of the technology there, and maybe make it a little bit more state of the art if you can. But if you know you're going to move out soon, I don't know that you're going to see a great deal of investment. because you can build that again a lot quicker than you could a new stadium. And so to maximize your investment, you may want to do that. But again, that's something that it's hard to say until they're voted in and they can talk publicly about those plans. It's just kind of conjecture or speculation.
Right. John Keim, ESPN.com with us. Do you think, John, this is the hard-hitting journalism that we do on this show, the turf field with all the deer poop, can that finally go at least?
I think that thing's going to last until the bitter end. It's amazing for people who have never been out there.
Why?
Well, now for here, you know what? I mean, I don't know, but
I don't know is the correct answer. There's no good reason.
Well, the reason why you don't do it now is because the cost involved, and they don't use it, and they have 3 fields there, and they've updated the other fields they installed new turf, and they improved the drainage. They didn't have the drainage system out there was really bad.
Oh yeah.
And in fact, it didn't drain. So you go out. There were times where literally there'd be like a foot of water. It'd be covered in water, and that was years ago, right? But that's something that I think you can, over the last couple of years, they definitely improved that. But with that turf field now, it just seems to be a place where when you have groups out there, that's where you're going to put the tents. And but it is not one that you want to run around a lot on.
No. What lasts longer, your career covering the Commanders, the turf field, or Keith Richards?
Oh God! I mean, Keith Richards will outlast everybody.
That's the correct answer. That's 100%. Yeah. Robin Williams had a great.
Turf will be next. That turf, listen, they should almost whatever they do with that facility, and once assuming they sell it, let's say they sell it, whoever buys it needs to somehow preserve that turf field and just hold events on it once in a while.
Just put the team Hall of Fame there or something. Robin Williams had a great bit in one of his stand-up specials about how Keith Richards is going to be the last human being on Earth after a nuclear apocalypse with a bunch of cockroaches just looking at him going, Hey, I smoked your uncle.
When you mentioned him, the first thing I thought of was it's like a cockroach. They're just going to be here forever. Not that he's a cockroach, but it's same kind of thing. So yes, I think he will.
Keith Richards is the correct answer. John Keim, ESPN.com, with us here on the Hoffman Show. Okay, let's do the thing that everybody cares about the most. On the football side of this, now that we have a little bit better idea of a timeline, we still don't know for sure. This thing could get done in Minneapolis. Unlikely to get fully done there, but it's possible, I guess. And then sometime kind of 90-day-ish window where this thing probably gets done. What is on hold right now for Ron Rivera and the football side, and what things can proceed?
Well, one of the things on hold would be the naming of the offensive line coach. So eventually it'll be Travell Wharton, but that's something they want to get approved. That would be an ownership approval thing, and so they're waiting for that to get there. So there's some coaching staff maneuvering. The staff is in place, but it's just more getting the titles, et cetera. That's on hold. You're not going to suddenly extend, I don't think, a Montez Sweat or Cam Curl right now until you get probably some clarity and direction from a new owner. But that's me just saying that it makes sense versus hearing it directly from them, right? So, gotcha. But that would make sense that it would be hard. Like if you're going to do a deal with Montez Sweat and you're going to have to, give a lot of guaranteed money or whomever, and whether it's him or Cam, you're not going to want him to do that without a new owner's approval, at least to say, okay, yes, go ahead and do it, right? And, doesn't mean the guy has to say, well, wait a minute, I don't like how Montez rushes the passer. He needs to develop this move. He's not going to do that. But you do, it is a lot of money. So you do want to make sure that they understand why you're doing it. And so at this point, there's no rush because if you can be talking to Montez Sweat's side, for example, and understand and get an idea of what both sides can do or are willing to do. And then when the time comes, you can go to a Josh Harris and say, this is what we want to do. Is that okay?
So along those lines, like as you said, Harris, I don't think is going to come in with strong opinions on pass rush styles. But it's very clear from this prospectus that you and Seth reported on today that they have a very clear vision of where they can take the business, certain opportunities. Like they have a clear understanding of a lot of stuff. How much do you think that they know on the football side? Because they'd be doing it from the outside. As far as we know, Ron Rivera, outside of maybe a quick hello, has not spoken to Josh Harris. There certainly hasn't been like a large debriefing at this point on the direction of the football operation, what has done and what is planned on being done should Rivera stay. So what kind of understanding do you think this group has of the football operation, and thus how long will they be evaluating before they make any kind of move, big or small?
That's a good question. It's hard for me to say how much. Like what I would say is, from what I've heard for a while, is they're going to take the year to evaluate. I don't think they're going to come in and make any sort of rash move. So I'm sure that they, if you're doing this, you're going to be talking to people about what someone else feels the situation is like. But I think if you're also a savvy businessman, then you're going to come in and see what your experience is with them. And so that has always been my understanding of what will happen, whether it's the football side or the business side. And keep in mind, too, again, if it doesn't happen until, let's say, July, well, you can't come in then and change things. It's not a good time to do that. And so, they're going to get the season to evaluate. So whatever they have, whatever preconceived ideas or notions, it'll be confirmed or debunked over the course of a year. So this group, whatever they think, this group will get a chance to prove that they should stay or go.
Yeah, the timing of that dictates, which, by the way, is, that's a whole separate rant that I've done on the show of the NFL dragging its feet throughout this whole thing, kind of costs the Commanders this offseason. But at the end of the day, we are where we are.
Yeah, and I don't know what they could have done differently. Like, you weren't going to get a sale like this in February. And
sure, I just meant when all of this stuff came out, or even at the Wilkinson report, which obviously was very bad, even though it got buried. Like, they gave him the largest fine in the history of the league. There was clearly a lot there. Like, could you have forced a sale if the owners had the chutzpah to actually vote him out? This could have been done a long time ago. Versus
they were never going to do it over that investigation. That's so it's what you always have to do with the owners is it's the pocketbook. And, it may not be the what people want to hear, but it's also the truth.
Sure.
So they weren't ready to vote him out at that time.
I understand all that. That doesn't make any of it right. I'm not saying you are saying that it does. That was the opportunity, and the opportunity cost from the football side is ultimately this has drawn out into now yet another full off season where the Commanders have had, January through, really November when he announced the sale and kind of went to London and never came back, through now where the Ron Rivera and company have been operating without an owner and just had to kind of do the best that they can. Last thing I want to ask you, John, I know you're a huge NBA guy. Obviously, we had so many basketball conversations out in the media annex over the years. Sixers just wrapped their season. The Devils had a very successful season. How much do you take out of this Harris Blitzer group's other sports and how they'll approach this? Or is the NFL wholly unique and you think they'll operate in a different way than they have in the NBA and the NHL?
I don't know that they'll operate differently, but I don't know that, I don't think approach changes, but I do think you have to be cognizant of the league that you're in. And the NFL is unique, and it's more powerful. It's more, it's just more. It's, there's more exposure. There's more attention paid to it. So you do have to understand that. And it's also, as you know, these organizations are put together differently. In the NBA, you need those superstars. There are certain things that you have to do to get the Joel Embiids or guys like that, because that's how you ultimately build a top contender. In the NFL, there's just, it's really about putting together. There's obviously more players, and the quarterback's a huge deal. But you have to construct it differently and take the different things into consideration, right? And so, but I don't think their approach will change. I think the approach should be is you hire the right people and you let them do their jobs. That seems to be, based on the people I've talked to, what they have done in Philly and New Jersey for the most part. Like, I don't think you're going to have Josh Harris in there telling people to change a draft grade on a quarterback, for example.
That never happened, John.
So I don't think you're going to have that. So I think like that. That's the approach that you take. Now, but I also think one of the things that you have to do here is make sure you have people who understand and know the NFL and can understand the rhythms of the season. What if you're on the marketing side, what you're asking players to do and when and why, or why it might not be a good time to ask that, for example. So little things like that, just understanding the rhythms. But that's also, like I said, so the NBA will be different than the NFL, different than the NHL. But I don't think your approach as an owner will change. Like one of the things, David Elfin had written a story for Bethesda magazine, I think it was, years ago, where he had talked to Mark Ein and Josh Harris. And one of the things Harris said in there is he did believe in setting up an organization with a GM and then a coach. Now, obviously, here's the coach and then the GM. Does that mean he's going to come in and do that automatically? I don't know. But, and if it's working this year, then you don't. But if they do want to change, I think you can look at that sort of a structure, right? So, I think the structure and the approach, the way you approach it, I don't think will change. But you do have to adapt and understand that the NFL is different than the NBA and is different than the NHL.
No, 100%. Also, I have had lots of chuckles over the last couple of days as Philly fans and people who just hate the Sixers because of the process have freaked out because they have won 50 games 4 times in the last 6 years and then flamed out in the second round in most of those years. If the Commanders win 12 games 4 of the next 6 years at any point in the next decade, or 4 of 6, and then just, oh my God, they lose in the second round of the playoffs, do you realize how happy this fan base would be? John, how happy you would be covering that many playoff games?
Yeah, no, it would certainly be different. Craig, I have never covered a team that has won 11 games in a season, in the regular season. I've covered this team since 1994.
Wow.
That says quite a bit. And so, yeah, and I know it's all perspective, right? I mean, I would talk to fans on the road last year, and it'd be like, I just want to win. I just want to see them win a playoff game. That's it. And, but once you do that, what's next?
Right.
Like I'm a Cavs fan. Was this year good enough? Maybe, but it won't be next year.
Right.
And you can say like, well, just look at how bad it was. Yeah, it was bad, but now the expectations have gone up. However, I think what fans.
Oh, no. Did John's phone? Oh, no, John, I think we got you now. Nope.
Sorry, yes, you got me.
There we go. Now we got you.
Yeah, sorry. So I would say I think the bar is kind of low. It's don't be investigated. Build a good product that fans can take pride in again. And for a long time, as you know, they haven't been winning, and they haven't been able to and fans can't take pride in being fans of this franchise. And so that's what I think has to take place. And I definitely get the sense from dealing with people in this group that they understand where this fan base is at and what the things that they want to do to invest in that. And I know some fans are going to say name. That's not on the top of the list, but I think what they understand more than anything is the need. What they have to do is build something good. And if you don't, it's not going to matter.
Yeah, the honeymoon will end.
If they do, then that's what matters most. And for some people, they may not come back because they just got tired or whatever. But they also have to focus on also building up a new generation of fans.
Yeah.
And so, that's where if you can build a winning team and create some excitement here. And, I don't think it would be that hard. Craig, people here know, and the organization now know, this city was ready to embrace them again going into before that Giants game in December.
Yeah.
And then they lost. But they were ready to embrace them. So these people are ready to jump. My sense, talk to every fan, and certainly fans are going to have different perspectives. But I do think, like, if you can build it right, and and Dan Snyder's out, because we know for a lot of people that was a number one thing for them, that people will hop back on. I don't think that the love for football here is gone. I think it was just a hellacious wearing out and exhaustion of losing, of issues, and then I also think, Craig, too, some of it was you'd have these hopes that would extinguish pretty quick. RG3 going to be here for 10 years, making magic, and then it's 1 year, and then that's it. Scott McClellan comes here, and then that was a problem, right? Kirk Cousins does well, but then he leaves because the contract never was going to match up with where each side was at. So, you know what I mean? So, one thing after another, and then it's enough. And then the investigations, right? So avoid those, build a winner, and people will be back.
No doubt, and I think something that's pointed out in the prospectus and some other numbers, Evan Novi-Williams, our buddy from Sportico, had a great chart the other day. It wasn't really till Kirk left, and there's obviously other stuff that was happening. McLuhan, kind of at the same time. That was when the revenue fell off. So it's not that long ago that people were still willing to give it a shot.
Correct. Listen, it was the funny thing is, that was the year where I think people just got tired of, that whole discussion with Kirk, but which followed the downfall of RG3. And so I think people got worn out. But yes, you're right. It was, and if Alex Smith doesn't get hurt, Craig, who knows? Does this really go down? And I've talked I know people here think if Alex Smith doesn't get hurt, this group isn't even here.
Maybe.
In coaching staff. Yeah. We don't know, but the point is, they felt he was a good professional quarterback. And you could win 10 games with him, and then go out and win a playoff game or two, right? So, you're right. It's not a long time ago, and if you're a fan of this franchise, how are you not worn down? I give people here a lot of credit for sticking it out, because it's not just. We've all rooted for losing teams. I grew up in Cleveland. I rooted for a lot of losing teams. But it's all the other stuff. And it's just, you want to at least, the Indians would be bad, but you knew the organization was good and they're going to build something because you had trust in that, right? Mm-hmm. And so, but did you have that here? I don't think and I remember the word trust I would use a lot. They have to rebuild this trust. And so for the Harris Group, one of the things with top priorities is rebuilding that trust. And how do you go about doing that? And a lot of it is by your dealings with the public, with the suites. And again, don't embarrass the franchise.
Yeah, no doubt. Week 1 this year, hands in. All right, John Keim's covered this team since 1994. He's never covered an 11-win team. Cakes on 3, 1, 2, 3 cakes. I think that's the rallying cry. Here we go. All right, I think you have to go, sir. You had something to do. I've taken far more of your time than I anticipated, but it is always good chatting with you, and hopefully we can have you again back soon on the radio.
Thanks, Craig.
John Keim, everybody. My buddy, my pal. John was my best friend when we were on the beat together. Phillips and I were the class clowns. Let's get that very straight. But Cakes was a guy that I could just go to with everything. Is so instrumental. If you like this show, you can thank John Keim in large part. If you hate this show, then it's probably the parts that John wouldn't do. So it's Cakes is great. What can I say? Appreciate his time here on the show. Hopefully we can start having him a little more often as well. All right. When we get back, let's take a little bit deeper dive into the football. A little Take Command Tuesday here on the Hoffman Show.
DC has a new home for your favorite songs.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube too, youtube.com/at the Team 980. YouTube stream, by the way, popping today. Popping. This is one of our, I just looked at the numbers for the first time today. One of the absolute biggest days we've had on the stream. Probably that's what happens when John Keim joins the show, you know? He's a big old celebrity superstar. Right now, speaking of celebrity superstars who know lots, Logan Paulson is going to, well, you're going to hear his voice. It's on tape. Take Command that came out this morning. We do this every single Tuesday, a little Take Command Tuesday. Give you a taste of the podcast that we do twice a week. By the way, mega super announcement. Speaking of superstars, pew, 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 pew. Anthony, are you ready for this?
I am indeed.
Tomorrow on Take Command, we are recording with a former Logan Paulson teammate who is a former NFL MVP, the newest analyst for CBS Sports, Matt Ryan, on Take Command tomorrow.
Matt Ryan, how you get him?
It's just email the PR person. It really wasn't that hard.
Oh, you know people. Okay.
Yeah.
You know people.
Yeah, they shout out and they're like, hey,
about you, man.
hey, we got Matt Ryan. He's new on CBS Sports as an analyst for us. Here's the announcement. And I replied, and I was like, does that mean he's available for interviews? Because I do a podcast with his former teammate. And they're like, yes. And now we're talking to Matt Ryan tomorrow.
I'm looking forward to hearing him on the Hoffman Show in 2 days.
Yes. So Matt Ryan tomorrow on Take Command. Make sure you subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. For right now, though, how about Logan Paulson dropping knowledge on the undrafted free agent class that the Commanders had. Some talk through rookie minicamp as well. Take Command Tuesday here on the Hoffman Show. Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulson. All right, Logan, let's talk some football. Commanders sign their UDFAs, undrafted free agents. They made a couple of moves, like, guys they had signed to futures contracts, things like that, that get let go. Drew White, I think, was one of them, the linebacker, and they're ultimately at 90 guys now as they head into OTAs here in the next couple of weeks. Anybody stand out for you of this undrafted free agent class? And then we can talk about some of the drafted guys as well as we work our way into talking about rookie minicamp. But let's start with UDFAs because we haven't actually talked about them yet.
Yeah, so I know everyone's been asking about UDFAs. So we're going to talk about like receivers, safeties, corners, and just kind of go in that order. So the receivers are kind of an interesting group, actually. Like Mitchell Tinsley from Penn State's a guy that I think a lot of people had a draftable grade on. He's here. He's 6'1", 205. Not the fastest guy, not the biggest guy, but really good route runner, really good contact balance. Did return punts in an all-star game, so there is that to him. And I think his last 2 punts in that all-star game were pretty well returned. Like I said, he's not like this flash return guy, but he's got the balance. And if you're looking for a guy to maybe be your 5th, 6th guy with some return upside, he'd be an interesting guy to keep an eye on, especially as training camp goes. Bryson Tremaine, out of Stanford, 6'4", 212 pounds. I think that's probably a little bit light for him. He's exactly Cam Sims. Like they basically ran the same 40. They have the same arm length. They play in a very similar way. Very physical, big guys. He's a little stiff, but good short area quickness. He kind of reminded me of like Drake London light, kind of a bigger guy with kind of like that basketball suddenness. Plays gunner. So again, if you're looking for a receiver to make the roster, that special teams value is pretty big. And, he did have a one-on-one rep with Emmanuel Forbes and was able to beat him on the slant, like in a, very physical way and kind of bodied him up. He did drop the ball, but like it was a nice, clean, well-run route. And so with both those guys, I think you see, NFL caliber players. You know what I'm saying, Craig? It's like sometimes you watch guys and you're like, man, that guy, there's no world where I see him kind of making the roster or figuring it out. But for those 2 guys, you're like, oh, obviously those guys can play and do some stuff. The other guy is Kazmir Ahn out of UCLA, kind of bigger, like wider bodied than I thought he'd be. He's 5'9", 175 pounds from UCLA, kind of return specialist / receiver / running back. Did some nice stuff from the slot. again, it's really hard to kind of flush out an evaluation because there's coverage bust. Guys don't know exactly what they're doing. But return kickoffs in college, that's predominantly what he did. I think he had 59 returns of kickoffs in college. And then in the East-West Shrine game, which is a all-star game, he had 6 punt returns where he didn't look quite as comfortable, but didn't have any issues catching the football. So again, if you're looking for a guy to maybe make the roster with some special teams upside, those are kind of the 3 guys from that group. I will have to say Jalen Sample from Minnesota State, he's listed at 6'6", 200. I think he's smaller than that, but did have probably, I think it was 2 explosive plays over the top of the defense on the first day of rookie minicamp, kind of running by the defense. And obviously it's really hard to say that's going to translate really well, because I will say when you watch rookie minicamp, it feels like you're watching a bad college practice. And it's not because the talent's bad. It's just because you're getting a whole bunch of guys in who've never practiced in the defense. It's like,
Right.
they don't know the tempo. They don't know what they're doing. They're kind of figuring it out. So does that translate? Does that translate to varsity level? I don't know. I will say in terms of just straight receiver skill set, the guys that stick out to me were Bryson Tremaine and Mitchell Tinsley. Those guys kind of were the 2 receivers that I thought, just watching the film, watching them at rookie minicamp, I thought these guys have a shot. And plus their special teams upside, I think that really doubles down their opportunity. And then Casimir Allen, I think, is a little bit too specific, but again, has some explosive play potential there. So
that's what I was
those
going to
are,
ask.
yeah.
Yeah, is with Casimir Allen especially, because he was like everyone freaked out when they signed him. The Twitterati who loved the draft and love college football were like, this dude's so explosive. They, Commanders have needed a returner. They've been, I can't believe still people are mad that they let DeAndre Carter go, right? And Allen is a guy that was super successful at UCLA in that
Right.
return game. But is there a place on a 53-man NFL roster for essentially a returner? Like, sure, it's one thing if he's Dante Hall, but
Right.
if you're not that, and does he have enough, I guess would be the other part. Like, is there enough of the wide receiver running back stuff? But is there a place if a guy's actually an exceptional returner, maybe not Hall of Fame good, but like really, really good returner, is there a place on an NFL roster for him? Or is it too specific and there's not enough versatility there and it's not worth the spot?
I definitely think there's value there, and I do think he can play other positions. It's just, if I'm picking a receiver from the bunch to return, it's Mitchell Tinsley, right? And I know he doesn't have the same name recognition, but he catches the ball well, and he's got some good contact balance. I think he's going to be a good NFL returner, and he has excellent upside as a receiver. And I think the thing about Casimir Allen is everyone thought he was going to run like a 4.2 coming out. He ran a 4.55, which is essentially the same thing that Bryson Tremaine ran. And Bryson Tremaine is 6'4", 6'4.5", probably 225 pounds, like basically a candidate to convert to tight end. And so I'm not saying Bryson Tremaine's going to return kicks or anything like that, but it's just that's the type of athlete you're dealing with. You're not dealing with this kind of hyper explosive, hyper twitchy athlete in the same vein of like a Devin Hester or something like that. It's a very average skill set. And so that was something else that was interesting about watching rookie minicamp. And again, it's rookie minicamp, so it's really hard to flesh out an evaluation. But you don't see that top end juice from him in the same way that you saw it in college. Like just because guys are a little bit faster, they're a little bit bigger, and I think it'll be interesting to see as he gets more comfortable what that looks like. But quite frankly, like his return stuff in college, it wasn't he had 59 returns, but 60% of them were touchbacks. It wasn't like every return was a touchdown. It was like, solid return here, solid return there. Where he really shined was in the context of the offense, catching bubble screens, catching, in certain running situations, jet sweeps. That's where he really shined. And my question is like, you mentioned, is there a spot on the roster for a pure returner? I'm not sure he is that. There are certain guys like Matthew Slater coming out. Was a gunner. He played gunner. He played all 4 special teams at UCLA when I played with him, and he had 6 touchdowns returned for touchdowns, right, off kickoffs. And so he was a return specialist and a special team specialist predominantly. And obviously he's parlayed that into a great career. This is a different situation, I think, with Casimir Allen. I hope it works out for him because he's a Bruin. He's a UCLA guy. I like his film. It's just, is he?
You better say nice things, or Doc Walker's going to appear in your house and smack you.
Right, but is he that elite? Is he elite enough at the position to make it happen is my question for fans who are, and again, it's rookie minicamp. So he might come out and look like that dude once he's kind of settled in the offense and knows exactly what he's doing. So, but as of right now, a little harder to kind of make that assertion.
Yeah. I also wonder for a guy like that, he's a premier potential example for 40 times versus GPS times. Because,
Yes.
if he comes out and everyone thinks he's a 4.2 guy based off the tape and he's running away from people and it's all there, it comes out, runs a bad 40. Some dudes are just not track guys. And the 40 is such a technical, we talked about this at the combine. It's such a technical thing. You lose 2/10 off a bad start and you go from being a 4.3 to a 4.5 guy. But I wonder now that they have the GPS data, if there's any, like what his GPS data is. Is he running at the speeds that the 4.3 guys are running when he's actually in pads out there on the field? Or is it a little slower and people maybe weren't as surprised by the 4.5? Those are the kind of things I wonder. That's something that's going to become a bigger part of the conversation over years to come. Don't really need to talk about it in depth now, but just food for thought as we move forward in the future with future draft prospect analysis next offseason. Anybody else stand out? I said you want to do corners, right? So
let's do safeties. We'll do safeties first.
Okay.
I will say that we'll kind of combine them together. I will say that for whatever reason, the corners, so Nick Whiteside the second out of Saginaw State, DeMarcus Fields out of Texas Tech, and DJ Striggs out of Missouri Western, couldn't find a lot of film on those guys. Like in the database that I use, the names didn't come up, and it makes sense with the Saginaw State and Missouri Western because those schools aren't like big D1 programs. But the Texas Tech kid didn't come up either, so a little confounded by that. I will say they all have the frame you want: 6'1". Nick Whiteside 6'1", 200 pounds. DeMarcus Fields from Texas Tech 6 foot 200 pounds. DJ Striggs 6'1", 202 pounds. So kind of a bigger corner that they like here. I thought at rookie minicamp they all moved well. Again, Nick Whiteside I thought made some good plays, but also got beat a couple times by Jalen Sample from Minnesota State deep down the field. Again, it's rookie minicamp. They're learning the defense. They're learning when they have help. So, take that for what it's worth. But I'm not sure that any of those guys are going to definitively like stand out in camp. They've got a lot of depth there at the cornerback position, especially drafting 2 in the first and second round. So I'm kind of pumping my brakes on this group, but we'll see. Maybe someone flashes in training camp. The safeties, however, are very interesting. Kendall Smith, Illinois safety, 6'1", 205 pounds. He played obviously in that backfield with all these Illinois defensive backs that got drafted, and he was the fourth guy. He plays, he's a bigger guy. He's 205 pounds. I thought he was going to be in the box a little bit more. He's a true post safety, and he's not the fastest guy in the whole world. He's not like the most explosive guy, but he is very instinctive, and I like that for a true post, a guy that just kind of drifts to the ball in the right way. I think he had 5 interceptions, right?
I think that's
just
right,
kind of being around the football, like getting tipped up or catching it. Like he's got good ball skills. And for a defense that's trying to prioritize that, I think that's great. He played safety. So I think that's obviously advantageous, for special teams value and stuff like that. Is he going to make the roster out the gate? No, he's got a long road ahead of him because they've got a couple guys here, Percy Butler, namely, who are very good at playing post. And he lacks the same kind of versatility as some of the other guys they've drafted in the past. He is a post player. So he's going to have to make it. He's going to have to maybe diversify his skill set a little bit, but a good football player, fun to watch his tape, hard to watch his tape because he is in the deep post a lot. So you got to watch like 7 games for him to make like 3 tackles, but that's not his fault. That's just because he plays the post all the time. The other guy from Michigan State, Xavier Henderson from Michigan State, 6'1", 210 pounds. Man, I turned on his tape and I was kind of blown away by it. I was like, how did this dude not get drafted? He ran a 4.4 at his pro day. He's a big guy, 210 pounds. He hits like a big guy. He can track the ball well. He plays the overhang kind of star nickel position, which again is like the Buffalo nickel position in this defense. Right. I thought he did a really nice job of that. And I was like, why didn't he get drafted? He did have a knee injury after the first game of the season that affected his ability to play. And then he came back and he's wearing this big ass knee brace. And I still thought he played well. So obviously a tough kid. Football is important to him, at least from that analysis. And I was like, well, why isn't he not? Why didn't he get drafted, basically? Because he's fast, he's physical, he hits hard. And I think the thing I settled on is he's not great at taking on blocks. He's got 30-inch arms. And, like Cam Curlew plays the Buffalo nickel. has 32-inch arms, right? So there's a little bit of a discrepancy there. He has a hard time getting off even big receivers. So I thought when I first watched this film, when you watch his key plays, you're like, man, this guy's going to walk in and be the Buffalo nickel, because he did it in college. He basically played linebacker overhang. He also played a little bit in the post. So he's got a lot of position versatility. I just don't know if at the NFL level, if he has enough snap and enough technical acumen to get off blocks with tight ends and offensive linemen, or if he's just going to get enveloped. So I was super excited. I was like, man, this guy is my sleeper. He's going to make the team. And so I ended up watching like an hour of film on him. And then as you get into the deeper cut of it, you're like,
right. You get past the highlights portion and you're like,
maybe this is it. And again, he moves well, he hits well. There's good stuff there. It's just the blocks, taking on blocks in and around the line of scrimmage, which is a key part of that position, he didn't look super comfortable doing that. So that's, again, all these guys have their warts. That's his wart. And so I think that's interesting, obviously. And then there's three guys left. I didn't really watch the quarterback because he's a quarterback, undrafted free agent quarterback. He might make the practice squad. Who knows? The guy of the two remaining guys is Joshua Pryor from Bowie State. He's listed at 280. At rookie minicamp, he probably looks like 235, 240. I think that's an inflated number. It looked a little out of sorts at rookie minicamp. Again, hard to find film of him because he's a small school guy.
What position are we talking here?
He plays defensive line, and at 280, I was like, oh, he's going to be like this big edge setter. He's more of a stand-up outside linebacker, just looking at his frame. I'm not saying he can't develop into something, but he just looked really raw at the rookie minicamp. So, we'll see how that progresses. Mason Brook from Mississippi State. He's listed as offensive tackle. He played offensive guard. It says I have Mississippi State here, but it's Ole Miss. Excuse me. 6'6", 315. And this dude, Craig, holy cow, he didn't practice, but he looked the part, man. He looked the part. He's a big, tall dude, good athlete. I do not understand. He transferred in from Western Michigan to Ole Miss last year. He played like basically 90 snaps at the beginning of the year, and then something happened. He didn't play the rest of the year. So I don't know what happened, but in his snaps, he's a guy who athletically, physically can do it. You know what I mean? And so like with UDFAs, you're kind of like, what happened? And I would assume it had something to do with his whatever happened at Ole Miss that led to him not playing for the majority of the last half of the season. Like, I don't know what that is, but he can play football. So in terms of offensive line depth, getting some value in the draft, I think they're, undrafted free agent guy, like that's a heck of a find. And we'll see how it develops, obviously, but athletically, all those things are checked. I was pretty impressed with him. It is his college tape. He didn't practice, obviously, at the rookie minicamp.
Gotcha. Quan Martin was excused absence for this. Emmanuel Forbes on the field, KJ Henry on the field. Obviously, a lot of the young rookies on the field. They're not rookies, but the drafted guys, they're all rookies pretty much. Although there were some young vets there too, which is young vets. Cool. But of the drafted guys, anybody in particular stand out? And how did Forbes look as the first rounder?
I mean, Forbes, the first play of 7-on-7, had a pick from the slot. I mean, it was like right on cue. It was like, oh, hey, like he didn't practice a ton, like he didn't, like he's
getting ready for actual OTAs to play with the guys that are going to be his teammates.
Right. So he didn't practice a ton. So I remember the first day, like, you're going through the film and you're like, where is he? Like, was that 13? No, that's not him. And then like literally the first play of 7-on-7 interception, you're like, oh, there's 13. Like I said, he, little undersized. I think the thing that got me was just how aggressive he was to break on everything. I kind of was concerned, like you are, like people start talking about how you turn the football over, and as a player, that's all you think about, and like that's my value. I need to make that happen. And so I kind of wish that he had just chilled out a little bit, but did a great job, made some plays. Got beat deep down the field a couple times, but I felt like he was in phase and could have made the play. I mean, he's the first round pick for a reason. Excellent job. So did play in the slot the first day, which was a little surprising. Like I said, Bryson Tremaine kind of beat him on a slant. Bryson dropped the ball, but Bryson kind of out physicaled him at the line of scrimmage. So that's something when you're 166 pounds, you need to get addressed. The offensive line guys, I thought did a good. Stromberg looked excellent, but again, he's playing against a whole bunch of undrafted guys on the inside who are tryout guys. So he should look excellent. And then Braden Daniels played left tackle predominantly for them. He's gained a lot of weight. I talked to him in an interview. He said he's gained about 25 pounds, in that 320 range. I've never seen a person look more like a guard. Like, he just looks like a guard to me. He looks like a guard. Obviously, he's a good athlete. He moves well. Him and Andre, that's not his name. Who was the 7th round pick?
Andre Jones.
Andre Jones. They kind of were battling on the left side. Andre Jones, again, you see the length, you see some of the movement skills. Practice tempos were kind of different for everybody. There's a couple times where I thought he had Braden beat, but kind of stopped, which is good practice habits because you don't want to be running into the quarterback. KJ Henry, I thought, looked great. He beat his man a whole bunch of times, but again, he was going against the kid from Illinois State, the tall guy who's 6'10", who's on the roster. And
Right.
that guy hasn't played football for like 2 years, and he looked a little bit rusty. So, where is he at versus like varsity level competition? Hard to tell. Christian Rodriguez, I thought, looked great. He's like a thick, big body guy. Looked a little out of shape, but it's rookie minicamp, so that kind of stuff happens. Is that everybody? That is everybody.
Think so.
Yeah.
Like
So I mean,
it's
they looked kind of as they should. I do think Braden Daniels, after seeing him, is probably a guard. KJ Henry might, be a guy who makes the 53 in a rotational role. I think Andre Jones is probably, we'll see what happens. He's got some good tools, but again, it's the first day. It's hard to tell exactly what's going on, but I think everybody did what they were supposed to do. Also say the kid from Illinois, the safety, I forgot his name, had an interception. Kendall Smith had an interception. So, that kind of, the guys who are supposed to be ball hawks were ball hawks and made some plays. So, don't read too much into it, but I think it's a solid group of guys. They did a good job. I think the UDFA guys, there's some interesting names in there. And the draft guys look fine versus competition they should look fine against. So
that's the goal. Next stop, OTAs.
OTAs. And that's where we got real stuff happening. So not that this isn't real. This is an important part. But
no, this isn't real. This is not NFL football. These are not NFL football. Most of these guys are not, with all due respect, they're 5% best players on the planet. But unfortunately, to be an NFL player, you got to be the top 1% to 2%, and some of these guys are in the 3, 4, and 5 range. So that's just the nature of.
I'm glad you brought that up
of the sport,
because it is like people are like, well, what do you glean from this? It's like you're going against I think they had 39 guys who are tryout guys who will probably not be in the NFL. So it's hard to tell.
For sure. Hoffman Show with the Team 980, always live on the free Odyssey app. Richard Deitch coming up at the bottom of the hour. Streaming live on YouTube as well, youtube.com/@theteam980. Anthony, one thing that I haven't quite figured out with the YouTube stuff yet is that my beauty light here, which is great and very helpful. It keeps me looking as best as I possibly can with this radio face I got going on. But like, I got to start the show with it here, and then I turn it down because it gets darker outside and I don't need as much light. But I can't. We need a professional light person. You think it's in our budget for a whole video crew?
It's a great question, Craig, and
it's not a great question. The answer is no. We're just gonna keep going with what
I thought it was above my pay grade.
Oh, yes, it is.
Yep.
Actually, it might not be. You might be in here adjusting the light soon. It might literally be part of the job. Oh, gotta run in there. Adjust the light. Doot. All right, that's as good as he looks. Just sucks for him. All right, so here's what we got. Richard Deitch coming up, talking about the NFL going exclusively to a streaming platform for a playoff game coming up at 6:30. Plus, I want to ask Richard about some of the numbers in the ESPN story that we've talked about for a lot of the show today, because media rights is also in there. But, Anthony, we start tonight with tonight's NBA draft lottery. This is a monumental night. Like one of those nights that could change the course of the history of the league. That is what we think of Victor Wembanyama collectively as a prospect. The sports world, right? I haven't watched him outside of the highlights that everyone else has seen, but he seems to have a good mental makeup, and he's 7'4", and some people say more skilled than Kevin Durant. So he's bigger and better than Kevin Durant, and he's 19 years old. Like, what the bleep? It's crazy to think that there's a player that could exist that good. But I think that there's also like a good curtain peel back here that, at some point when Dirk Nowitzki was roaming the earth, and by the earth I mean NBA courts, people stopped putting limits on players, right? It used to be if you're 7 feet tall, get your butt inside. And there's still some of that too. I don't know. I think we were talking to Linnell yesterday, and we were talking about, Joel Embiid, if he just get his butt inside. And it's like, yeah, Joel is a great back-to-the-basket player, and I do think that there were times in the series against Boston where he should have gotten down in the post and tried to go to work. Al Horford's also a great post defender. Also, saying Joel Embiid takes too many jumpers when he could take tough post-up, hook shots or open jumpers. Like, I'd rather Joel Embiid take the open jumpers. He's a good shooter. But largely, we have these guys like Kevin Durant, Victor Wembanyama, and the likes that are 6'10", 6'11", 7 foot. Kristaps Porzingis, obviously, highly, highly skilled. Now, the difference in skill level between Durant and Wembanyama and Porzingis is still pretty immense, but the idea that these guys will bring the ball up the floor. I mean, there were moments in the game the other day with Philly where Philly was running sets on purpose with Joel Embiid bringing the ball up the floor. Nikola Jokic runs point. Nikola Jokic will be a screener and pick and roll a ton in the Lakers series. He will also run some pick and rolls as the ball handler. Like, that's the kind of thing that typically doesn't happen. But we've now made it so that at the youth level, and I do think the international players were ahead of America on this, at the international level especially, everyone does everything. Hey, it's not the guards go over here and dribble and the bigs go down to the other end and practice hook shots. It's like, hey, we're all gonna go through the skill work. We're all gonna go through the shooting work. And the idea is you become the best basketball player you can be, which is to have the most skills possible. And then all of a sudden, the natural evolution of that is you wind up with a 7'4" French wonder kid who is extremely skilled and has the potential to change the NBA and be the next guy. I also think it's important to point out that, these things are never guaranteed. It seems so sometimes in hindsight. It seems, and LeBron is the only one that's ever seemed like a sure thing and has really panned out to that level. But like Zion, when he's on the floor, is incredible. He can't stay on the floor. KD was a number 2 overall pick. We knew he was going to be really good. I don't think anyone knew he'd quite be this. Obviously Steph Curry was a 7th draft pick. We didn't know about Giannis. We didn't know about Jokic. Embiid had mega health issues and still gets hurt in the playoffs every year, or has been hurt in the playoffs every year. So there is nothing that is guaranteed, but it certainly seems like Wembanyama is at least in like the Zion category of, if this dude stays healthy, he's going to be awesome and his team is going to win a lot.
I think that's just the big if though. Like it's so hard to like predict that stuff. Just like Chet Holmgren, like he got hurt in a exhibition game. Like
Right. It's impossible to predict. No, I wouldn't say impossible. Actually, I'm going to specifically not say impossible because there are certain things now that we have from a data standpoint, collection-wise, where we can evaluate injury risk a little bit better. But it is impossible to know with certainty.
Yeah, and I just feel like also just with this draft class alone, like we legitimately seeing kids that are just 18 years old come into the league, and I mean, they've sort of discussed like whether or not they'll still require, you to do 1 year out of high school and things of that nature. But just seeing these kids not necessarily reclass, and I cover high school basketball locally, and a lot of kids reclass because where they rank in their class. A lot of these NBA teams, they don't care about where you rank now. They want to see what you are and who you are as a player at your age group. So, Bronny James, he might not be the most athletic. He might not have the highest IQ. But for where he is and how old he is, he's only 18 years old. And they just want to recognize your potential. So I think this draft class alone just a huge testament to that. You look at the Jarris Walker, who's from Baltimore, Maryland. You look at Cam Whitmore, who's from Odenton, Maryland. These guys didn't reclass. They just stayed the course. And look where they are now. They're top 10 projected draft pick. So I just would like to, praise those guys for just staying the course, not caring about, reclassing and trying to be the number one overall in your class. No, just get through high school, compete, and then allow NBA experts and things of that nature to see what your potential potential is.
That's really well said. And, Whitmore out of Oklahoma, or sorry, not out of Oklahoma. Oklahoma rhymes with Villanova, and for some reason, my brain is apparently at the end of its wits today. Whitmore out of Villanova, just take him because Villanova kids are always apparently better than you think. Just take the Villanova guy. But no, he's obviously extremely talented. You have some college players. Brandon Miller's super interesting. Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem like the legal issues at Alabama. For those that don't remember, there was the shooting at Alabama, the murder at Alabama. I still think that's going through the trial process. But his teammate charged with murder. Miller's the one who gave him the gun. Obviously, he's going to maintain that he didn't know what for, but still, that is out there. And I do wonder if certain teams are going to take him off the board completely because of that, depending on how they feel about him. After interviews and things like that. But he seems to have moved firmly into the number 2 spot. Then you got Scoot Henderson and the Thompson twins, who both all played in the G League this year. You got Cam Whitmore and then Jarris Walker out of Houston, who obviously lived the number 1 team in the country most of the year. Anthony Black out of Arkansas. Taylor Hendricks out of UCF. Grady Dick out of Kansas. That's ESPN's top 10. But like Bobby Marks told us earlier on the show, at least through Walker probably, you got a pretty solid tier behind Wembanyama that if you lose the lottery tonight, you can still have a very, very, very good player join your team. I think the thing that's different about Wembanyama is pretty simply you then have the guy that you need, right? We talk so often, and I make this point all the time whenever we talk hoops, Anthony, you need a top 5, top 7 player in the league. Wembanyama in 4 years is going to be that. So and then that begs the question, if you're the Wizards and you win the lottery tonight, does that enhance your desire to trade Bradley Beal? Woo. Or does that, and what do you do about Porzingis and Kuzma? Or does that say no, we should keep these guys and Wembanyama might be good enough right now to add to that and we just go for it now. This kid's going to be awesome, immediately learn on the fly. We think if we add him to what we had, we can go. I think that's a fascinating question. I think I know which direction I'm going to go, but what do you think?
You're speaking it into existence, Craig. Yeah, I really have a strong feeling the Wizards are going to win this draft lottery tonight.
Wemby.
My thing is,
Wemby.
My thing is, we're seeing a lot of things turn around here in DC. Dan Snyder's about to be on his way out the door. The Nationals, everyone projected them to lose 100 games. They're they've been
They might
playing
only
well.
lose like 95.
Exactly. It might not only be 90, 92. So I'm just saying, like, we're slowly but steadily see things turn positive for our local team. So I'm thinking the Wizards, we're going to do well in this draft lottery. Even if we don't do 1 and we're 2, hey, I'm cool with that. But as long as things start to turn around.
Anthony. No. We can't already be settling in our,
right.
our wishful thinking. There's no set. Like number 2, that would puts analyst hat back on. Number 2 would be very, very good in this draft. Frankly, going up into the top 4 in general, anything like that is good in this NBA draft. It's almost as good as the fedora that Anthony just put on his head for no bleeping reason. Back to wishful thinking.
Yes, sir.
Wemby.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey.
The Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube, youtube.com/@ the Team 980. Tomorrow on the show, never read the comments. Excited for that. Also might hit up Yates. So I'm out Friday. I'm actually out Thursday, Friday. Scott and Doc will be in. Also for the YouTube audience, I don't think we'll be streaming the show those days. Two beautiful men. However, just for technological reasons, back-end stuff, we will not be streaming those days unless something changes. So that's that. But with me being out tomorrow, maybe we'll get Yates on, or me being out Friday. I'm gonna see what Yates is up to tomorrow as well. Also, there's I would say a 50-50 shot we have Seth Wickersham on the show tomorrow. I was texting with him a little bit earlier. He's been all over the place today, traveling, but he obviously wrote that story with Kime. We got Kime on the show for a full half hour earlier, but we will have that. And then Anthony, I think we can probably run the Matt Ryan stuff tomorrow as well, since I'll be out on Thursday.
That's a whoa, why is that loud? That's a bet.
You just murder your own ears?
I did.
Nice. Ladies and gentlemen, radio professional Anthony Haiti. We really need an applause sound effect. That was very anticlimactic.
We just need to add those to your board because I have them over here.
Yeah, you have. There's also been some stuff that I've asked for on the board that isn't up here yet. Is that because it never got done? I'm not trying to throw you under the bus because, like, sometimes I ask in the middle of the show and you've got 700 other things happening. Like there was the Draymond, when Draymond went on a rant and was like, about Dylan Brooks, he was like, this idiot. Did we ever cut that?
I don't think I did.
Okay. And I'm sure there are also some that you have cut that I never realized and I just never put them on the board.
Yep.
I should probably check the library on that. Yep. In the meantime, we just, keep going with.
He almost pooted on himself.
Classic. All right. Tonight, Western Conference Finals begins. Again, the draft lottery is on ESPN first. And then you have the Nuggets and the Lakers. I am so fascinated by this series. And, the matchups is where I always go. Anthony, I was thinking about this yesterday. When I was like in college and I was just like writing a blog because I wanted to put my sports takes out. By the way, if you're young whippersnapper listening who wants to do this one day, write as much as you can in your younger years. It will help you find your voice, and you might even learn a thing or two about sports as you are able to stare at your own predictions when they are right or wrong after the fact. But I would always go through every NBA playoff series when I wrote about them and do like list line by line. Like this guy will match up with this guy will match up. And not just like these are the starting lineups, but like cross match offensively, this is who's going to be guarding who defensively, etc. And with this series, it's so different than when these two teams met in the bubble because the Lakers just played a completely different style. One, the only main guys that are going to be in this series that were in that one are AD, LeBron, Jokic, and Murray.
And KCP.
Well, I was going to say, KCP has switched teams. But that's it. Like all the ancillary pieces. Although I do think Jared Vanderbilt and Malik Beasley were on Denver at the time.
Michael Porter was also on Denver.
Michael Porter was, but I don't think he was
really
playing. Yeah, certainly was not playing the way he does now.
Yeah.
But like the main four guys are the same, and that's about it. But the Lakers at the time had JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard, and they played defensively very, very differently, very effectively, but they were much bigger. And now with AD guarding Jokic, I am curious to see how that goes because Jokic is a guy who can draw a lot of fouls. Like he will drive on you and put pressure on you and, take these awkward floaters that AD is going to try to block. He will probably get a couple, but he might pick up some fouls, trying where other guys just kind of don't even bother, right? You have AD's lateral quickness. Can he cut off Jokic and not let him get to his spots in the way that Jokic is supposed to? And I think at the start, like this series is going to start very similarly to the Lakers and Golden State series, where both teams came out and just played their game and saw what happened. Like, I think the Nuggets are going to try to do Nugget stuff. I think the Lakers are going to try to do Lakers stuff. And then, depending on how that goes, a team will make an adjustment, whether that's more or less pick and rolls for Jokic and Murray, whether that is Porter getting more or less involved, whether that is LeBron playing from the elbow or playing in pick and roll or doing what he did in the Golden State series where he actually is not on the ball a ton and picks his spots a lot more. Does D'Angelo Russell try to really attack? So there's a lot of potential adjustments to be made, but it starts out with who guards who. And I think the big ones are going to be, do the Lakers start Schroeder and have him guard Murray? Because D'Angelo Russell's obviously not. Russell will cross-match with KCP, and that's probably how the Nuggets will also, like, Jamal Murray's not going to guard D'Angelo Russell. I would imagine KCP does, especially if Russell's on the ball a lot, because he's just a better defender. But for Schroeder, does he play or does Vanderbilt play, and do the Lakers go bigger and try to go size on Murray? And that way, if you get caught in a switch on the pick and roll with Jokic, you're not dead on arrival like you are with Schroeder. I think that's the direction I would go. You've obviously watched a ton of Lakers basketball because you're a LeBron fan. Is that which one would you go with?
I think they go with the bigger guard, Vandy. I think he's gonna come back into the starting lineup. We did see him sort of fizzle out of the lineup for them towards the end of that series, but I think that was just Darvin Ham making the right adjustments.
I think that was specific to Curry as well. Like, I think Schroeder did a better job on Curry than anyone else. Like, Steph was driving past everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, his ability to manipulate defenders because he leverages his shooting better than anyone else ever has. Where, like, defenders almost, like, intentionally get behind him because they're like, oh, my God, he's going to shoot. And Schroeder's quick enough that he didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
And it's just, you don't have that like, you're not facing Stephen Curry anymore. Jamal Murray's great, but he's not Stephen Curry.
Yeah, but Jamal Murray is also a little bit bigger than Schroeder. So I think you just start off the bigger guard. You throw Vandy out there. You see what he can do if he can frustrate Jamal Murray a little bit. Also, he might be a little bit better on the pick and roll with Jokic just because of his size. But I think Vandy starts out this series.
I think you bring a good point up. I mean, Murray's not huge.
Nah.
But he does love to post up, and his post game's exceptional. I don't think he's posting up Jared Vanderbilt.
Yeah, he just gets to a spot. He's like Jalen Brunson almost. Like, Jalen Brunson isn't the biggest guy, but he will, give a shoulder to create some space. And I think that's ultimately what Jamal Murray will be trying to do against Schroeder and, like, any other smaller defenders.
I am fascinated how the Nuggets try and guard LeBron. I don't think there's an obvious answer. Like, I don't think Porter's dedicated enough defensively, nor do I think he has the lateral quickness to keep up. Like, I think LeBron will get 3 fouls on him in 5 seconds.
I don't think you put him on him. I think you go with 50, number 50.
Oh, Aaron Gordon? Yeah, that's probably the right answer.
Stronger, more athletic, and that's more so like his identity now. I feel like he came into the league trying to figure out what that identity is, and
that's a great call. He's is built. I mean, he did a great job on Durant.
Yeah.
LeBron's a different animal.
Yeah, for sure.
He's a different beast, different strengths. You have to play the drive a lot differently. And then the question I have then is if they do that, and I'm the Lakers, I'm putting LeBron, AD, pick and roll, and we are just like Malik Beasley. Make sure your shot's ready because you're playing this series. Austin Reeves, obviously, get ready, kid. You're going to get a lot of spot-up shots. I am trying to get them switched because I don't know that Gordon, as good as he is, has the length to deal with AD on the post if then they just want to get the switch and then dump it down to AD. Or, I mean, obviously Jokic is not doing anything with LeBron in terms of guarding him. So that's it's a bad switch if you can get it. And it's two guys that probably aren't used to coordinating a ton in the pick and roll, right? Like, I don't think that Jokic and Gordon have defended a lot of pick and rolls this year. But they're smart players. And, the good news is you could play more of a drop coverage and you force LeBron to shoot. The problem is LeBron, at this stage of his career, is a pretty good three-point shooter. But if I'm them, I kind of almost go back to like a 2009 strategy versus LeBron, where I play a ton of drop coverage, I clog up the lane. If LeBron's going to beat me making threes, okay, but I'm almost going to try to get inside his head and be like, I'm not even going to guard you. Go ahead, try. And you hope that he has a bad night and it gets in his head. In year 20, at age 39 or 38, good luck with that. But I think that's probably the best thing they can do in that situation. Is play that drop coverage, not overexpose Jokic, try to keep Gordon on LeBron as much as possible. But it's obviously then, you can see what adjustments the Lakers make from there. All right, when we get back, we'll talk to Richard Deitsch of The Athletic, talking about the NFL's decision to put a playoff game 100% behind a paywall. The Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube, youtube.com/at the Team 980. Joining us now, great friend of the show, sports media writer for The Athletic, Richard Deitsch. RD, how are you, sir?
Doing well, Craig. Yourself?
Doing well. Another exciting day full of ESPN reports about Josh Harris and Dan Snyder. So, you know, that's really what our dreams are made of these days.
Yeah, the latter name I'm not very familiar with. Sounds like somebody I may have heard of, but not exactly familiar with that gentleman.
Yeah, we can't get rid of him. So I actually want to ask you about some of the numbers, just like media rights in general and how they can change with team ownership in a little bit. But I want to start with the main topic that we had talked about discussing with you, which is the NFL decides to take a step that many thought were coming but still were surprised by. They're going to put a playoff game completely behind a paywall. They got, I think it was $111 million from NBC Universal to put the wild card game that they have this year on Peacock. Why do they think this is the right move for them?
The answer to all your questions is money, sir.
Isn't it always?
There's no other reason that the NFL is doing this other than it's a very, very simple way for them to collect another $100 million. And when I say them, obviously we're talking about the owners. Yeah, the players will get some of that, and that's good. But that's the reason first and foremost. Secondary reasons are they do want to see what the appetite is for NFL fans when it comes to what their interest will be for a postseason game behind a paywall. I think obviously the NFL is really interested in probably less about the viewership and maybe more about the data that Peacock will provide them in terms of signups. And if you could somehow link to how many more signups will Peacock get because of this game. I think if you're just sort of a casual NFL fan, the real interesting thing is going to be this. What's the game, right? That's where nobody knows that yet. And that's where we'll have a really good indicator. Like if they decide to put the Cowboys like as the Peacock playoff game, well, that's a real significant statement by the NFL that they really want to see like what kind of streaming possibilities they have in the postseason. You know, if it's like, I'm just making this up, right? Like if it's Jacksonville Texans or whatever, you know, whatever the lowest like kind of interest wild card game is, it's much less of a deal in my opinion. So that to me would be the key thing to watch is like what game does the NFL decide to put behind that paywall?
So, you know, soccer fans, I know we've talked about this before in a variety of different contexts. Like soccer fans are used to getting this kind of abuse. If you're an NWSL fan, like you just signed up for Paramount Plus a couple years ago. But it was also something where CBS, they decided Paramount, their parent company was like, no, we get the Champions League rights and we're going to put a lot of those games behind a paywall. And it made sense for Paramount, obviously, to do that because that was going to pull all the soccer fans in and make them subscribe. But soccer fans were used to having to chase games. And thus, they just did. For the NFL, for their fans who are not used to this, whose games have been on free TV forever, the only way you'd have to pay for it is if you were getting Sunday Ticket. Like, what is the NFL effect? Like, is this something that you think is sustainable for them long term? Or is this Mark Cuban's, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered quote from exactly 10 years ago when he said this is 10 years away for the NFL from happening, starting to come true?
No, yeah, absolutely think they can do it. Now, again, don't mistake that for me supporting it, because I certainly don't. I'm obviously very consumer and fan-friendly, but they have data up the wazoo that says people will watch their products no matter where it is. And until that changes, until a significant group of NFL fans decide that, no, we're not going to watch something behind a paywall, or no, we're not going to pay a couple $100 for YouTube, they have all the leverage here because they have the content, the most desirable content, quite frankly, in entertainment, and people want to watch that. So I don't agree with Cuban at all. I think the NFL is just the one entertainment commodity that essentially can, for the most part, do what it wants because the people who consume that product have basically told you that we'll do anything to consume that product. I think the real risk factor, honestly, is on Peacock. Because, you just spend $110 million, and the thing is, like, how do you monetize that? And the only way to really monetize that, obviously, is if you get a ton of signups from having the NFL, whether you're getting it in terms of marketing that game is part of your portfolio or the NFL promoting Peacock, let's say, on some of its other programming. So to me, that's really where the risk lies. It's not to say $100 million is a ton of money for NBC Universal, because it's not. But, that $100 million could go somewhere else. It could go for another rights package. It could go for, 500 jobs to people. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's always a cost-benefit analysis of where that money would go. So I think they have the risk. And, no, I don't agree with Cuban. Like, I understand where he is coming from, and I agree with him that the NFL owners are incredibly greedy and, generally speaking, not fan-friendly. But until you stop sampling the product, like, nothing's going to change. That's just the reality of the business model.
Richard Deitch of The Athletic with us here on the Hoffman Show. Team 980, team980.com, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Is there a bridge too far that the NFL can go with anything in terms of their media rights, or do you think is it truly just that bulletproof? And I guess I'm not just asking it because I'm not trying to re-ask the same question I just asked Richard, but is there a timeline here, right? Is there any kind of they can do this for a couple years, they could do this for one game a year? What is the point where it no longer actually becomes beneficial to the NFL and their partners to do this, where there would be a downside?
Yeah, I mean, I think the bridge too far is to put conference championship and Super Bowl behind a paywall. I don't expect that happening. Bridge too far would be to put too many games during the regular season, in some kind of Peacock product. I think that becomes a little bit of a bridge too far. But these guys aren't going to do that. For one thing, they have contracts already that go very, very deep. Into 2023. Nothing like that could happen until the 2030s. Because there's contracts in place. So I don't think there's a place that the NFL could go where it really would turn off consumer demand. In the next series of contracts, maybe. It's hard to know what the world is going to be in the 2030s. But, that is possible. But the NFL has historically put reach above everything. That's why so many of their games remain on free over-the-air television. And I don't think they'll ever change the business model in terms of trying to get their product in front of as many people as possible. And unless the American consumer changes, where the American consumer has no problem buying whatever, that every American, that's a little hyperbole, 100 million Americans are not going to buy 7 streaming services. If that did happen, then maybe you could put all these NFL games behind a paywall, but I don't see it. Say what you want about the NFL. They do have a lot of smart people who work for them, and they have a lot of people who are, whose job it is to sort of maintain and survey consumer data. So the short answer to that is no. I don't, certainly not in the next 7-8 years, and I don't think they would do that honestly, whatever their next contract is. I mean, at the end of the day, they need to get that product in front of people.
So we had your buddy and mine, John Alrand, on the show, I want to say 6 weeks ago or so. So sorry for that, for having him on. It's supposed to just bugging you every single time there's a sports media.
No, he's a Baltimore lover, so it works better in the region.
Well, especially when there's a Nats O's Masson conflict. Alrand's going to be our guy there because he cares on a deeply personal level. But I remember talking about this with John. Something that you just said struck this chord with me. You say 100 million Americans are not going to buy 7 streaming services. And what we were talking about is the fact that we've kind of almost been duped into doing so. It feels like a lot of us have 5 already. Paramount Plus, ESPN Plus, Peacock, on down the list. Netflix, and who knows if they get into live programming or something like that eventually. Apple TV, obviously, now big into that as well. And it seems like there are sports leagues now. We've seen this now in Phoenix with the Bally Sports thing falling apart there, where they're trying to go for that reach game and being free over the air, making their games accessible. As these market forces go in seemingly opposite directions, NFL willing to try a streaming service behind a paywall, other leagues going in the opposite direction. Do you have any sense of where this lands, or is it going to land all over the place and there's no real consensus and we're going to continue to exist in a splintered marketplace as consumers?
I mean, I think there'll be some consolidation, because I think some of these streaming services ultimately won't make it. I think there'll be a couple that just basically cannot just spend. You can't, even if it's part of a legacy company, you just, at a certain point, there's just diminishing returns. They cannot just spend as much as they are spending with not getting the return. But you have to remember that, watching sports is not an inalienable right. It's a product. It's a product that is a significant business, and fans are going to have to pay for that business. You just they're not putting baseball on free. They're not putting soccer on free. I do get the frustration, because what's happened is every sort of, Paramount's made its sort of claim when it comes to soccer. So if you're a diehard global soccer fan in the U.S., you kind of got to get it. But then if you're a diehard global soccer fan, you probably like the Premier League, which means then you got to get Peacock as well. So, I understand the frustration. And I think some of these places, may not exist 10 years from now. But, I think ESPN Plus, Disney Plus is long for this world. I'd be very, very surprised if they don't have something, whether it's Peacock or something else. I think NBC Universal will have a digital streaming on. I'm near certain Amazon and Apple will be part of the equation in some form, whether that's Amazon Prime, Apple TV, or something else. And I honestly, at this point, would be stunned if Netflix doesn't get into sports in some form. I don't know how big it'll be, but I think they'll get in. And, whatever Google sort of is, whether it's YouTube or something else, I think they're going to be in play just because they have so much money. So I think the reality is, if we're going to project it out 10 years from now, maybe it's not 7 streaming services, but it certainly won't be 1.
Right. And if there's some way that they can come together and make it so it's easy to switch channels, like you could use
a streaming bundle, like the way the cable bundle is.
I mean, it's also just from a user experience, Richard. We're you just used to hit the last button on your cable. I sound like a 100-year-old man right now, but I just want to be able to hit last channel and flip between 2 games. And when they're on 2 separate streaming services, you can't. And
you can't do it.
It's just a user experience thing,
I hear you. The problem there is I don't see a world, honestly, where Apple and Amazon and Google are all in business of streaming sports rights, and you could somehow buy their 3 bundles. It's just they're separate companies. They have separate properties. I don't see it. There's no other product that those kind of companies all work together. So why would they do this for what is really a small sliver in their business? But trust me when I say I get it. It's incredibly frustrating to have to switch out of one streaming service to another. This is why it's almost in some ways impossible to watch sports without having a second device.
Right.
You know what I mean? You have to have a laptop or a phone near you, and I get it. That's very, very frustrating for a lot of people.
I do wonder if a company like a Fubo, I don't know if they're big enough, but they have the infrastructure to could they pull in a stream from one of those services and just make it another channel? That's free business idea, Fubo. Give me a call. Real quick, Richard, before we let you go, I did want to touch on these numbers real quick in this ESPN story. The larger story is about the windfall that the Josh Harris group sees coming when Dan Snyder is gone, because Dan is so incredibly unpopular. But specifically, it says in this leaked prospectus, in this outlook, the team's total revenue, which includes dollars from media rights, would soar from $545 million in 2022 to $959 million in 2032-33, or potentially even over $1 billion if there's a new stadium. Obviously, not all of that is media rights, but what are some of the ways that you've seen NFL teams on the local level sell their media rights to that I doubt you're familiar with what the Commanders are doing now. They're not doing a lot, but that you've seen that you think are smart and sustainable that NFL teams are doing.
Yeah, I haven't read the ESPN story. I certainly will. I know it got a lot of attention today. Well, I mean, for one thing, in terms of that projections, maybe the projections are sort of figuring what Peacock just did, right? Right. In terms of the NFL has this package, and they're able to get an additional dollar figure there. So, the NFL, there are ways for the NFL to create or take existing inventory and to figure out ways to bring significant money in. So I would say that's probably part of the equation. In terms of locally, you probably have a ton of opportunity to sell some kind of shoulder auxiliary programming to multiple places. I know the regional networks are sort of blowing up, so it doesn't necessarily have to be like an RSN. But, think about the value there. You have digital rights, you have audio rights, you have potential television rights. And so depending on who might be interested in that, and obviously if the Commanders become a business-friendly organization, or they start winning, you could sort of start to see locally, a lot of places might be interested in that kind of programming. Admittedly, that's a big dollar figure in terms of media rights increase. You're not going to get that just from putting the games on the radio. So I would think, without knowing anything, this is just pure speculation from me, my guess is those projections probably roll in the assumption that the NFL is going to figure out ways to increase its media rights for all 32 teams. I'll give you an example. Like, I don't expect this to happen, but I'll just give you like a hypothetical.
Sure.
What if the NFL just decided to make the NFL draft 4 days instead of 3, right? And so they put up whatever that second day, that new day is. Let's say it's just, I'm making this up again. Let's say the new day becomes day 2, and contractually, like, it's not in the ESPN NFL contract in terms of like what day. So you put like day 2 NFL draft up for bid, and then let's say, I'm just making this up, Amazon decides, oh, we want to like another part of the NFL, and we're going to bid, $100 million for the rights every year for day 2 NFL draft. So, you know what I'm saying? That's where you start to see like money come in that you might not expect. You have enough of those deals, and then maybe there's where your $300 million for a team comes in. So the NFL can take existing things and create some inventory. Although I will say, just from based on what you told me in terms of those numbers, that projection feels high to me, just at least in my first response to you.
Yeah, definitely. It also is something, locally here, their media rights, they currently don't really have any. They just ended their deal with NBC Sports Washington, so that seems like something that could be big for preseason and ultimately, pre and post game type of stuff. So I do wonder, what.
But keep in mind, you can sell off all that, right? You can. Right. Again, like Josh Harris decides, like Fanatics is going to sponsor every Commanders pre and post game show, and you got $50 million from Fanatics. You know what I mean? So there's ways to monetize this stuff.
For sure. Richard Deitsch, you can read him in The Athletic. Really great stuff always, Richard. Appreciate your time here on the show, and next time something comes up, we'll bug our end.
No problem, man. Thanks, Greg.
See you, buddy. Richard Deitsch with us here on the Team 980. We get back, a quick trip to the microphone. Real things, real people said, into real microphones is next. show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. What a show today. John Keim joined us. Who else joined us? Bobby Marks joined us. Richard Deitch just joined us. And now we're going to go blind. Anthony, which one of this is the best? We got Paul George and DeMar DeRozan, Steve Kerr, and Woj on Wembanyama. Because we probably only got time for one of these. So I'm gonna play the magical tune here, and then I want you to tell me on the back end of it which one we're gonna do. Anthony's call today for real things real people said in real microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5-11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All right, Ant, what do we got?
I think we can play all three.
Oh, my goodness. I better get them loaded up. Let's start off with Paul George and DeMar DeRozan reliving Dame Lillard's famous buzzer beater. Actually, let's not, because that's a minute long. Anthony, do you know how time works?
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Steve Kerr knows how important it is for Draymond Green to stay with the Warriors. This one's much shorter. This will allow us to also get to the Wembanyama bite.
If Draymond's not back, we're not a championship contender. We know that. I mean, he's that important to winning and to who we are.
Yeah, I think that's a correct assessment. They got to get Bob Myers back so we can get started on these contracts. All right, NBA Draft Lottery tonight. Adrian Wojnarowski, ESPN, sum it up for us.
This is the most highly anticipated player to ever enter the NBA. And this is maybe not only the greatest prospect in the NBA's history, maybe the greatest prospect in the history of team sports.
Wow.
That is an overstatement. Look, it's hard to overstate how good Victor Wembanyama is. But LeBron James existed. LeBron James was the most sure thing that has ever sure thinged in the history of sure things. Also, Peyton Manning existed. Like, there's been some guys over the years that we have the data on that we thought coming out they were worth it. Maybe Peyton wasn't as hyped because there was some teams that were like, I don't know, we could take Ryan Leaf. But LeBron, the Wembanyama can be on that level. But, like, LeBron's LeBron.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. All right, we'll see you tomorrow. BetMGM Tonight is next.